deep dive. Today, we are going to be taking a look at Learning All the Time by John Holt.
Oh, yeah.
And he has got some really
He does.
interesting ideas
Yeah.
about how kids learn. And I think some of them are,
Revolutionary.
definitely like challenging some of our assumptions.
Real unorthodox.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
get ready for,
education.
a total brain shakeup.
For sure.
Um,
Mindset shift.
Yeah, so kind of the core idea is like instead of seeing kids as these empty vessels waiting to be filled like little sponges.
Right. Passive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just soaking things up.
What if they're more like little scientists constantly experimenting, figuring things out on their own terms?
Yeah. Constantly testing out hypotheses.
Yeah.
And observing.
Yeah, and I love how he doesn't just throw this idea out there. He has all these great anecdotes.
Real life examples.
Yeah, from his own life of observing kids.
Yeah.
And it's just so fascinating.
Yeah.
There's this one about a 4-year-old named JP who was just obsessed with lilies, like these flowers.
Okay.
And he starts mixing up all these different concoctions, trying to, make the best fertilizer he can.
Wow.
And it's like his own little science experiment,
Oh, cool.
right? He's not following a recipe. He's just like driven by this curiosity. And get this,
I'm on the edge of my seat.
his first written word,
Yes.
lily.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Like, it's just so telling.
Right.
Like, learning doesn't have to be this, rigid, structured thing.
Right.
It could be messy and playful and just totally driven by a child's own.
Innate curiosity.
Yeah. And so I guess that kind of brings up the question for you, the listener,
Yeah.
how can we as adults encourage this kind of curiosity?
Yeah. How do we
In
avoid
kids in our lives?
squashing that
Yeah.
natural inclination?
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with just a mindset shift, right? Instead of always being the teacher,
Oh, for sure.
we have to become
The guide on the side.
yes, the facilitator.
Right.
Like, think about it like a gardener,
Oh, love that.
right? You're providing the soil, the sunlight.
The environment.
Yeah, but you're not like forcing the plant to grow a certain way.
Exactly.
You're just creating the conditions for it to thrive
Yeah.
naturally.
Really. I love that.
And so it's not about throwing out all structure, but it's about finding that balance of creating a space where kids feel safe to,
Explore, experiment.
yes, make mistakes.
Yes.
Because mistakes are part of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And mistakes are just data.
They are, yeah.
It's feedback.
Yeah. And this is where things get really interesting
Okay, I'm ready.
because he challenges this idea of like there being this critical period for learning.
A window of opportunity.
Yeah.
That shuts.
Right. Like if you want to be a musician,
Right. Start when you're 2.
you got to start when you're 5 or, whatever.
Or you'll never be any good.
Yeah. And he totally turns it on its head because
He was a late bloomer in many ways.
he learned to play the cello at 40.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That's wild.
It's really about consistent, self-motivated practice.
Wow. So it's never too late
Never too late
to learn something.
to pick up something new.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about all the times I told myself I'm too old to learn that now.
Right.
Like, what a limiting belief.
What are we doing to ourselves?
I know. And, it reminds me of my niece. She started playing piano at 9,
Mm-hmm.
and she never did like those crazy intense practice sessions,
Yeah, like 4 hours a day kind of thing.
Yeah, but she just loved it,
Just enjoy playing.
She played for a little bit every day,
Consistency.
and now she's like tackling these really complex
Wow.
classical pieces. It's amazing.
So that steady engagement.
Yeah, it's not about the hours logged.
Right.
It's about that consistent, joyful engagement.
That's it.
And this is a huge takeaway for you, the listener.
Think about it.
Have you ever felt like you missed the boat on learning something new?
Have you written yourself off?
Yeah. Or have you seen someone defy those expectations?
Yeah.
It's really empowering. Yeah, it is. To realize that, it's not limited by age. It's fueled by passion and persistence.
That's the ticket.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us to the next question. If it's not all about starting early,
Right.
what are the other key ingredients for successful learning?
What else is in that recipe
Yeah.
for success?
What role does motivation, environment,
Our own beliefs.
play in this whole process?
I like it. And one of the areas where Holt really challenges conventional wisdom is learning to read.
Well, yeah.
He kind of takes on this sacred cow of phonics instruction.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying phonics isn't the be-all and end-all?
Well, not exactly, but he raises some interesting points about its limitations.
Like what I always thought sounding out letters was like the foundation.
Right, it seems so logical.
Yeah.
But Holt argues that focusing too much on those isolated sounds can actually be misleading.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. A lot of consonants like B or D, you can't even pronounce them on their own.
Oh, you're right.
You naturally add a vowel sound. So drilling kids on these isolated sounds, it doesn't really reflect how we actually use language.
So it's like we're creating this artificial system. That's
Exactly.
not really how language works.
And then there's the whole thing about long vowels and short vowels.
Yeah.
Holt argues these labels are arbitrary and confusing for kids who are trying to grasp the natural patterns of language.
It's like we're overcomplicating things.
Yeah, instead of treating reading as a natural extension of spoken language, we're turning it into this code to be cracked.
So if phonics isn't the magic bullet, what does Holt suggest?
He advocates for a more holistic approach, emphasizing immersion in a rich language environment.
So like reading aloud to kids.
Exactly. Surrounding them with books, letting them see adults engaging with reading for pleasure.
He even talks about using something like the New York Times as reading material.
He does.
Wow.
He believes in exposing kids to authentic texts, even ones from the adult world.
So instead of limiting them to, oversimplified children's books,
Right.
we're kind of inviting them into this larger world of literacy.
Exactly, showing them that reading has a real purpose.
It's like saying, hey, this is how grown-ups use reading.
And you can too.
Yeah, you can be part of this.
It's not just a school thing.
That's so cool. And what about writing? Does he talk about that?
Absolutely. He dives into how children naturally invent their own spelling systems before formal instruction.
Oh, like that book, Gin's at Work.
Yes. Glenda Bissex's fascinating account of her son Paul's journey as a self-taught writer.
Yeah, wasn't it about how Paul basically created his own phonetic system?
Precisely. Bissex observed that Paul would develop his own spellings based on how words sounded to him.
I love that example.
He even spelled R as R-U-D-E at one point.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It shows how kids are trying to make sense of these patterns.
And apply their own logic.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is Paul eventually figured out conventional spelling just through consistent exposure.
Organically.
It's like picking up an accent by living in a new place.
Mm.
You absorb it without consciously studying the rules.
Perfect analogy.
And that brings us to another subject that often strikes fear into the hearts of learners, math.
Oh, yeah.
But Holt says even math can be approached in a natural and engaging way.
Absolutely. He emphasizes starting with concrete experiences instead of jumping straight into abstract concepts.
So like instead of just teaching numbers,
Right.
you'd connect them to real things.
Exactly like using everyday objects, dominoes, playing cards to help kids visualize and manipulate numbers.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And incorporating math into their everyday world.
So instead of drilling multiplication tables,
Right.
maybe we involve kids in activities like baking where they have to measure ingredients
Exactly.
or adjust recipes.
Real world application.
Yeah. And he also talks about the power of play.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Like he and his friends would invent these math games.
Like a version of Battleship where they were plotting points on grids.
They were basically doing coordinate geometry without even realizing it.
Exactly, and having fun while they were at it.
It reminds me of that quote, play is the work of childhood. And speaking of real-world applications, Holt has this interesting idea about teaching kids about economics,
Oh yeah, he believes kids should learn about economics through understanding family finances.
like budgeting and saving.
Exactly. He even suggests letting kids help with tasks like balancing the checkbook.
Wow, that's pretty radical.
It might sound that way to some, but Holt believes in demystifying money and giving kids a realistic understanding of finances.
And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Kids are naturally curious about money,
For sure.
so why not involve them in those conversations?
And help them develop financial literacy skills early on.
It's like we're empowering them to be responsible with money.
Exactly.
So I'm noticing this pattern with Holt. He's all about connecting learning to real-world experiences.
Excellent.
Whether it's reading math or finances, he wants kids to see how knowledge is used practically in their daily lives.
It's about relevance and meaning.
Yeah, and this makes me think about something else he talks about, the power of problem solving.
Oh, a crucial skill.
He calls them heuristics, right?
Yes, those strategies for figuring things out when you don't immediately know the answer.
Like instead of memorizing a formula for percentages,
Right.
he'd encourage you to experiment with different methods to see what works.
It's about fostering a mindset of experimentation and exploration.
And that can-do attitude.
Exactly, believing that you can tackle challenges head on.
And he actually shares this anecdote about himself,
Oh, yeah.
where he spent over 20 years working on a single math problem.
Talk about persistence.
It really challenges this idea that learning always has to be quick and easy.
Right. Sometimes the most rewarding learning experiences are the ones that challenge us.
and demand that dedication.
Exact.
It's a reminder that true learning is a journey.
Not a destination.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm struck by how Holt challenges conventional thinking about learning.
He really flips the script.
He's urging us to shift our focus from teaching to facilitating.
From imposing knowledge to nurturing curiosity.
Yeah, it's about creating learning environments where kids feel safe to explore
To experiment, to make mistakes.
and to learn at their own pace.
Absolutely.
And welcome back. You know, as we kind of get into the last part of this deep dive,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how Holt talks about how traditional schooling can actually hinder learning.
Right. It's not just about what we learn, but also how we learn.
Yeah, and he uses this term that I just love,
Oh, tell me.
penguinization.
Penguinization. I love it.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So picture penguins,
Okay.
all huddled together facing the same direction, conforming to the group.
Right. All in a row.
Yeah. And Holt argues that traditional schools often do the same thing to kids,
Huh. Interesting.
stifling their individuality and curiosity.
Makes sense.
It's like they're all expected to learn the same things at the same pace, regardless of their interests or learning styles.
Right. Like one size fits all.
Yeah, and if you don't fit into that mold, you're labeled as a problem or slow.
You're off the assembly line.
Yeah, and it creates this pressure to conform, to fit in.
And it makes kids feel like their own curiosity is wrong.
Yeah, it's like they're being told to shut down that natural instinct to explore.
And it makes learning feel like a chore.
Yeah, it's no longer this exciting adventure. It's something imposed from the outside.
Ugh. I hate when that happens.
I know, and it makes me think about those standardized tests that everyone freaks out about.
Right.
It's all about measuring kids against a single yardstick.
Instead of recognizing their unique strength.
And he also talks about how traditional schooling can be like a laboratory experiment.
Oh, yeah. Where kids are the subject.
Yeah, being conditioned to perform certain tasks.
Interesting.
And he's really critical of the reliance on rewards and punishments as the main motivators for learning.
Like gold stars and grades.
Yeah, and even the fear of failure.
It's all about external validation.
Yeah, and it takes the focus away from the actual learning process.
And it can really demotivate kids who don't thrive in that kind of environment.
It's like we're teaching them to jump through hoops.
Instead of fostering a genuine love of learning.
And, you know, this kind of connects to another idea that Holt brings up.
Right.
He talks about the medicalization of learning
Oh, yeah.
and how it's led to this over-reliance on diagnoses like learning disabilities.
Right.
And I've always felt a bit uneasy about that.
Me too.
It's like we're so quick to label kids instead of trying to understand why they might be struggling.
Exactly. And Holt isn't denying that some kids face genuine challenges,
Right.
but he questions whether we're too quick to categorize them instead of addressing the underlying issues.
So instead of asking, what's wrong with this child?
We should be asking what's wrong with the system
Yes.
that's not meeting their needs.
And this brings us back to Holt's central message.
That golden thread.
We need to shift from teaching to facilitating.
From imposing knowledge to nurturing curiosity.
It's about creating learning environments where kids feel safe to explore,
To experiment.
to make mistakes, and to learn at their own pace.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into learning all the time, what's the one thing you hope listeners will take away?
You know, I hope they'll walk away feeling empowered
Empowered to,
to question the status quo,
yes.
to challenge those conventional assumptions about learning and education.
It's a call to action,
It is.
to create spaces where kids can reclaim that joy of learning.
That thirst for knowledge.
So think about the things you're most passionate about.
The things that light you up.
How did that passion develop?
Yeah.
And how can you create those kinds of opportunities for the children in your life?
That's the question.
That's the question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Till next time.